This morning, when we dwelt on the theme of Tapasya of knowledge, we barely took one paragraph of a text which is so rich, so profound. But the passage we are now looking at, the Tapasya of Love, is even more profound, so much so that unless one reads it in its entirety, with deep concentration, one would not do justice to it. Because in this text, the Mother reveals to us the secret of love. She brings us close to the experience of divine love. And if we can approach it in the right spirit, with the right receptivity, we can actually experience a touch of the divine love, something so precious for which the whole creation yearns. She begins with what we experience as love, as human beings, and then points to the deeper truth behind. And she says the most difficult of all austerities is the tapasya of feelings and emotions, the tapasya of love. Because she says in this domain of feelings, we have the sense of inevitable, irresistible, the fatality which dominates, which you cannot escape. And love in the human experience is regarded as an imperious master who strikes you according to his fancy and forces you to obey him, whether you will or not. And so human beings invent all kinds of devices to control the force of love. And she says the very attempt to restrain it only increases its explosive power. And so control, she says, does not consist of suppression and abolition, but of transmutation, a sublime alchemy. This use of the word alchemy here is very suggestive, because there are two sides, two aspects to the expression of divine love. There is the transmuting power of the divine love from above, which embraces the whole creation and changes everything, as we will see shortly. And there is another side which is its representative in the individual, in the psychic being, in the psychic presence, which also has a similar character of transmutation. The touchstone, the paras in the Indian tradition. We read of the alchemical tradition where there is this precious gem, touchstone, philosopher's stone, or the paras pathar, the stone which is called paras. When it touches iron, it can turn it into gold. And this, although it could have a physical representation in literal terms, this even in the alchemical tradition is a symbol of the touch of this divine love. And especially in the contact that it has in the individual consciousness, in the psychic being. It literally has this power of transmutation. When we have an experience of the psychic being in its very substance, in the concreteness of its substance, we discover it to be literally the substance of truth. It is something entirely unimaginable. Everything you could have imagined it could be falls short of its beauty, of its sweetness, of its magical character. And when it touches, because it is something still living in the domain of life, when it touches anything, it has that power to transmute. And that is why it is the first secret, the first step in the journey of transformation. My teacher, Sri M.P. Pandit, because he was also the mother's secretary, had occasion to experience from the mother her love and her divine love, not once but again and again, over years. And the experience itself prepared him in a way that on a special occasion, when the mother asked him, "What do you want?" he said, "I want your love." She said, "You have it." And he said, "I want to share it." She blessed him for a long time. And we had the experience many times when he came down after meeting the mother, as if an ocean of love was coming down the stairs. We had the experience with him many years after the mother had left her body of her melting love gazing out through his eyes, and we felt its impact transmuting us, transforming us from deep within. These are experiences one does not normally share. But they carry a power which could perhaps convey something of that touch. I remember when I completed my studies in the ashram school, some strange things had happened. I was a little confused. I was surprised that such things could happen. And then he asked me, "Where would you like to work?" It was a point of choice where I let go my personal preference. And I said, "Whatever you choose." From that point on, it was as if he worked intensely with a purpose, with a concentration, to convey something, a touch of which I hope to be able to share. In the days that followed, every day I went with him to the ashram, and after going to the meditation hall, I would briefly bow down before him, and he would touch my forehead with his finger. I do not know when, I do not know how, but over a few days and weeks, I noticed that every time that he touched, it was as if I felt a ball of liquid golden light entering and gently descending into my heart, and there it would explode. Poof. And it would be a bursting out of pure love. And I don't know when I noticed that when I came out after that, I walked through the ashram to go to work, and I looked at everything, and the world was so beautiful. Everything was as if a miracle, something of such great beauty. Not only the flowers, the plants, the walls, the air was beautiful. I looked at people, and it was pure love that flowed. I looked at stones, objects. I felt love pouring out and love flowing from them. My greatest enemy was just the one whom I loved to feel as an enemy. Even enmity was just a facet of love. And I would be in this state, magical, where the whole world was beautiful, perfect. Nothing could be more beautiful. And I would go to work, The experience itself would last, gradually fade through the day perhaps, but I do not know, because over the weeks, over the months, it was as if another layer and another layer and another layer was formed and built for a period lasting perhaps 2 years, which I can still look back and say were the most beautiful years of my whole life. And I experienced there what it is that the mother is describing here. The magic of that divine love. Some years after he passed away, in the last year, things were beginning to change. And then over a few years, I found this thing began to fade. And only when it was lost that I realized that something of it sustained through the days, through the nights, and changed completely the whole character of life, of the purpose of life, the meaning of life, even the personality, even the body. And after that I had to struggle, I had to work to recover what was otherwise given as a gift. But it was in this way that the mother taught. It was this gift that she gave to each one who came to her. But one had to be capable of receiving it, and to the extent we could receive, we got what she gave. Especially when we went to her the first time, she made a special effort and she explained it was to cut through, to go deep, 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 all the way to the psychic being and to draw it out. To give a push to the deepest aspiration of the psychic being for its fulfillment in this life. And she tied a thread, she built a connection straight to the soul, which she said kept us connected with her for lives thereafter. So many were those who had an extraordinary experience in that first meeting, but not necessarily after that. Many were those who went to her, and in each meeting something special was given, but she observed with some sadness that by the time people came down the stairs from her room, they had lost it all and they were back to their normal consciousness. And it was because these things were given too easily, too freely, that humanity did not value them. But still it was an extraordinary manifestation where she brought down the divine love in a human body and poured it in the human beings around her. Something of this she refers to in the text for those who have read. She says here that sometimes this divine love, true love, is able to incarnate in a body. And even there, it has to work, it has to struggle through the limitations of the body. So something of this alchemical, transmuting power of the divine love is what we are able to feel when we enter in relation with our psychic being. Because the psychic being is the one vehicle which can receive that divine love in its entire purity. All the other parts, our mind, our emotions, our body, they tend to be overwhelmed. They tend not to be able to contain it in its purity, or they move into grooves of associated emotional reactions. That's why she speaks here of this sublime alchemy of transmutation which the divine love is able to bring. And she explains how the whole universe is in fact upheld by this divine love. She says, consciousness is indeed the creatrix of the universe, but love is its savior. And she says, unless you have an experience, you cannot fully appreciate this. But she says, I will try to convey that experience. And in the text that follows, you find this conveyed. Love is, she says, in its essence, the joy of identity. It finds its ultimate expression in the bliss of union. Between the two lie all the phases of its universal manifestation. Something so simply said, something so profound, it gives you the sweep of the entire cosmos. And the whole story of creation is captured in this. There are two extremes of love. In its essence, love is the joy of identity, and its ultimate expression is in the bliss of union. And she explains elsewhere that the whole creation was put out, the whole manifestation took place to realize this truth, to manifest this truth. All of possibilities were already held in the oneness of the divine consciousness. In that identity, where everything is one and held in that oneness, there was the love and the joy of identity, which is that love. But the ultimate expression is the bliss of union. But here there is already identity. Where is the question of union? Therefore, the oneness of the divine poured itself out into the multiplicity, and through the whole journey of evolution, that multiplicity of the universe comes back to unite with the divine. And when the whole cosmos moves back and unites with the divine, it is as if two different things merging. And in that is the ultimate expression of love in the bliss of union. So this highest bliss of the entire cosmos merging back with the divine without losing its separateness, merging into union, remaining still separate, that is the secret of this whole journey of evolution. And that bliss is something indescribable. If you could imagine an ocean of love bursting out in waves and waves, each wave being the entire ocean bursting out over and over again, each successive wave revealing a greater and more intense delight and bliss, growing unendingly, infinitely. Such is the character of that blissful union that the entire creation is meant to experience, to manifest in that divine consciousness. Sri Aurobindo points to this and says, all the suffering of the billions of years of the struggle of evolution to bring us where we are cannot be explained unless the journey further is something so extraordinarily beautiful that it will justify all the suffering that the creation had to go through. And all that suffering is perhaps as if necessary to build the base that would allow this kind of an extraordinary manifestation of bliss. And it is towards this that our individual journey of life is leading. Individually, collectively, universally, the whole universe and each substance and atom of the universe someday will experience this, and we would experience that oneness. Put in another way, Sri Aurobindo uses this image. I don't have the exact text, but from memory as close as I can recover. If honey could taste itself, and each drop of honey taste the entire comb, and the whole comb taste each drop entirely, such would be the relationship, he says, of self, universe and God. A drop of honey tasting itself, is that the experience of the self-realization. You experience the bliss of discovering yourself. But then after that, it's not complete until you experience the whole universe as yourself, and the bliss of tasting the honey of all that is in the universe, and all the infinite diversity of all that is. Each perfume of each flower, and each beautiful form of each flower and plant and being and animal and object is only a facet, a shade of the bliss of the divine love, gently revealing something of its touch. All experiences of the senses are meant eventually to be revelations, entry points, gateways to a facet of that divine bliss. And so you get a sense of where this is all heading. How long will that take? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Because each step forward from this point on can be a step towards something which we feel growing bit by bit, more and more. And she says, at the beginning of this manifestation, in the purity of its origin, love is composed of two movements, two complementary poles of the urge towards completeness. On one hand, there is the supreme power of attraction, and on the other, the irresistible need for absolute self-giving. And you will see this in the play of love, on whatever level it is, plant, animal, human, and divine. You see these two movements. The power of attraction, something draws our hearts. On the other side, within our hearts, the need to give ourselves absolutely. This is represented in the symbol and the physical reality of the manifestation of Sri Krishna's play, of his Leela. We have the story of how Sri Krishna in Vrindavan played the flute, and the gopis, representing the human souls, lost in their work, churning the milk, and that's also very symbolic. The milk itself undergoes stages of change as you churn it. The milk becomes curd, the curd becomes butter, the butter becomes ghee. These are all stages of purification of the human consciousness, the milk itself being the starting point of human consciousness. And the experience of life, the churning of the milk and the stages it goes through, is the gradual journey of our evolution, the purification of our consciousness. And in the middle of this activity in which the gopis are engrossed, they hear the call of Sri Krishna's flute. And suddenly they forget. They forget what they are doing. They forget who they are. And they do not know what they do. They are compelled irresistibly by this magic call to seek the source. And they look all around. They don't find the source. And eventually, when it seems like it's impossible to find the source and they're about to give up, briefly he reveals himself. And they catch a glimpse of that delight. And immediately there is a surge of new hope, new energy, new expectation, a promise of what can be. And they begin to search again, but he has hidden himself again. But the call continues. And bit by bit, in this way, he draws them away from their mundane life, draws them deeper and deeper into the forest, until eventually, deep in the forest, in the sacred grove, they discover him. And then there is the great symbol of the dance that takes place. Oh, there are other stories, variations in between. While they're looking for him in the forest, they're tired, they want to rest, they go for a bath in the river, and he steals their clothes, and then they're ashamed. They refuse to come out unless he gives back their clothes. Profound symbols. There is an aphorism of Sri Aurobindo, again I will say as close as I can remember it. where he says, when God tugged at my dress of sin, I was happy to give it up. But when he pulled at my dress of virtue, I was afraid and refused. It was then only when he tore it away from me by force that I realized how I had been deceiving myself. You see, this stealing of the clothes has a profound symbol. These are the coverings by which we deceive ourselves, hoping in the process to deceive others and especially to deceive the divine. I will digress a little bit. We'll continue with the narration of Sri Krishna's play. This is the story of the sadhak in the ashram who had done something which he thought was really bad, and he couldn't bear to speak of it to the mother. He knew that she could read his thoughts. He knew that she knew whatever happened to him. And so before going to meet her, he concentrated, carefully pushed back the memory of what he had done until he had himself hidden it from him. And then putting forward this very nice, sweet, angelic front, he went to the mother and she received him as graciously as always. And he came back. Whew, I managed to fool her. The second day he made the same effort, the same concentration. And the third day and the fourth day. Eventually, after a long period of struggle, he said, this is too much. I can't bear it anymore. It's too difficult for me and I feel guilty. I'm hiding it from the mother. And so he went to the mother, ashamed. She received him just as graciously. And he said, Mother, I want to tell you something I've been trying to hide from you. And very sweetly the mother said, don't worry. I saw it the very first day when you came. It was peeping from behind you. We think we can hide from the divine. We can conceal our errors, weaknesses, our sins from the divine, who is already within us, who is in the very substance in which our so-called wrong is being committed. The bad thoughts that take place in your mind, the actions which you do which you think are wrong or contrary to your ideals, they are taking place in the substance of divinity ultimately. The divine knows you more intimately than you know yourself, so who do you fool? And yet we need to do that at an early stage of our evolution, otherwise we can't face ourselves. It is one of the most painful experiences in the spiritual journey when you're forced to see yourself for what you are, bared completely. It is painful because you see in yourself everything, all the filth of the universe which you have criticized in others is all there inside you. Because you are part of the universal substance. You are not different. It's just easier to see it in others than to see it in oneself. And when you criticize, it's because you see things sprouting in others which in you may not have sprouted so much. But the soil is the same, the seeds are the same. Different things sprout in me, different things sprout in the other. And as I criticize him and he criticizes me, unknowingly we're all one substance. And we could just have been sitting in each other's bodies and it would have made no difference. It is a painful experience to have your robe of virtues torn away from you, but when that happens, it is such a great freedom. You can stand before the divine freely, without fear, without pretense, and say, here I am. Mold me, shape me, transform me, make of me what you choose. And the mother said she much preferred that people came to her that way than people came to her with this angelic front pretending to be this nice, pretty person. She said she had to cut through that layer to get to them to be able to change them. If they came as they were, then she could work on them as they are and make the transmutation more easily. And so the gopis in the rivers struggle with their clothes which Sri Krishna steals, and they are forced to face him as they are. The human soul stands before the divine. And through many plays, through many such mischievous means, he steals from you the very things which you are most attached to, the very things you consider most precious. And it is only when you lose what is most precious that you realize there is something more precious which you had forgotten. And you become free. The sense of freedom at each level, at each step of that journey grows. And finally, they meet in the sacred grove and Sri Krishna dances with them. As the journey has proceeded, they have been prepared, they are now open to Him, they know Him as their Lord. And when He dances with them, each soul experiences the Lord uniquely. And so they say, Sri Krishna dances with each gopi. He multiplies Himself and dances with each one. But He is not multiplied, He is still the same one. But He is uniquely with each person, but wholly with you. It's not that a part of Him is with you, a part of Him with another. He is wholly with you. And He dances. And the whole journey of life, the play of life, is the dance of this love, this self-giving of the human soul to the divine, pure love. You recall the text we read from Savitri this morning, and this whole world is only he and she. These two extremes we experience, the power of attraction and the irresistible need for absolute self-giving, which is deep in our heart. And this power of attraction is the very meaning of the name Sri Krishna. You've all been perhaps told that Krishna means black. And Krishna was called Krishna because he was dark. Yes, it's a sweet way of saying something, but that's not true. The root sound of the word Krishna, Krish, is akarshana. If those of you who know Sanskrit, akarsha is attraction. Krish is the power of attraction. And because black absorbs all light, it is also called Krishna. Because it as if attracts and absorbs all that falls on it. One who is the great attractor, the power of attraction which draws the whole cosmos to himself, into his unity, that is Sri Krishna, the highest personality of the divine consciousness. So these are the two movements, complementary poles of the urge towards completeness. On the one hand, there is the supreme power of attraction, and on the other, the irresistible need for absolute self-giving. No other movement could have better bridged the abyss that was created when in the individual being, consciousness was separated from its origin and became unconsciousness. No other movement except love could bridge these two. What had been projected into space had to be brought back to itself without, however, annihilating the universe which had thus been created. That is why love burst forth, the irresistible power of union. And you see the true nature of love. It is the divine embracing the whole universe and drawing it all back to himself. But then, Mother explains how that power worked in the universe at each step of its evolution. In that scattered, fragmented night, as science says, it was all empty space, but intense, pregnant energy, formless, black darkness. And this power began this awakening and the ascent and the slow formation of matter. And it is this divine love, now corrupted, hidden, reflected, deflected, distorted, which is the impulse in physical and vital nature, which brings together things and forms groupings. What holds the atom together, the subatomic particles, are nothing but unstable waves and movements of energy. Somehow they are bound together to create the stable form of the atom. What draws them and binds them together is this divine love. What draws the atoms together is this power of the divine love. Science only observes an attractive force, gives it a name and says, I have explained it. Nothing is explained. We just observe the power of attraction. But it is this power of love working in different ways and facets. And the groupings form, eventually accumulating to become the single cell, the plant, and so on. And Mother says, in trees and plants, it is the need to grow in order to obtain more light, more air, more space. In flowers, it is the offering of their beauty and fragrance in a loving efflorescence. Then in animals, it is love that lies behind hunger and thirst, the need for appropriation, expansion, procreation. In short, behind every desire, whether conscious or not, is this love. Reflected, deflected, distorted, but at the base, at the root, in the essence, the divine love that draws the whole universe to Himself. And among the higher species, it is this self-sacrificing devotion of the female to her young. You see, the mother gives herself to her children. And the love with which she pours herself is what nourishes the children. And she is willing to give up herself, die, so that her children may live. And it too is an expression of that love. And that's why in the yogic tradition they say, in the human expressions of love, the most pure, the most refined, the highest, closest to the divine love is the mother's love for the child. But still, that's as close as it can get within the human frame, in the normal human evolution. And then she says, in the human consciousness, nature took up this sublime force of love and put it at the service of her creative work by linking and mixing it with a movement of procreation. And it's a very close association that has been created. It's very difficult to separate the two. In this way, love has suffered every degradation. But she says, these are all steps by which the nature creates more complex groupings. Observe what happens. The first focus of nature in the individualization, in the formation of the individuality, is to create this sense of I. Because if you did not have a sense of separate I, what would happen? You would feel the pain of others as your own, and you would just go out of your way and offer yourself. The tiger comes and says, I am hungry. All right, eat me. Doesn't matter. So I need the instinct of self-preservation and separateness, and tiger wants to eat me. Run, protect myself. Create a separation. Otherwise there cannot be a stable focus of individuality. But the moment this individuality is formed in late teenage, immediately nature steps in and breaks that to create a couple. She makes you fall in love. And all of us have experienced the first burst of this love or falling in love is something almost uncontrollable in its intensity. And at that point, suddenly you're willing to do everything, give up everything, lose everything for the other. Of course, it passes. You learn afterwards, oh yeah, it's not quite what I thought it was. But when it comes, it breaks the shell of the hard ego crust. If it had not happened, I would remain stuck in my littleness and say, I and I alone, it's my life, don't interfere. I don't care what you feel. Right? It's only because that broke, suddenly I care more for your feelings than my own. And I will go through the ends of the world, I will get you the pot at the end of the rainbow and do whatever you like, just so I can have your love. But in this way, nature creates a grouping, a unit now of 2, and then of 3 and of 4 the child forms, and so on, the family forms, and now my family is my unit. My community, a larger family, my tribe, and so on. So nature uses this movement, she says, having made use of the power of love to bring 2 human beings together to form the Bayun group, the origin of the family, after having broken the narrow limits of personal egoism, changing it into a dual egoism, nature with the advent of children brought forth a more complex unit, the family. And families, larger groupings, clans, tribes, caste, classes, etc., nations eventually, And that has to culminate eventually in the unity of humanity and the unity of the universe, of all life in the universe. But this is this global plan, Mother says, which is working through all these impulses we don't even realize. She then points out how this love creeps out in brief flashes, the glimpses that Sri Krishna gives us when we are about to give up, so that suddenly we have a renewed hope. Each time an individual breaks the narrow limitations in which he is imprisoned by his ego and emerges into the open air through self-giving, whether for the sake of another human being or his family, his country or his faith, he finds in this self-forgetfulness a foretaste of the marvelous delight of love. And this gives him the impression that he has come into contact with the divine. She refers to this also as the magic effect of love. Each time you do something where you forget yourself, you help another, you give up some self-interest for a greater cause, you have this delight, something special, something magical takes place. And it is like that glimpse that Sri Krishna gives you. And you say, there is something even more beautiful waiting. You're reminded of something which you always knew deep within, but which you have forgotten long ago. And you forgot that you forgot it. Such is the memory, our memory of our oneness with the divine. We forgot that we have forgotten it. But these glimpses remind us of something, and we know something more beautiful is possible. That's why in the literature, they give you glimpses of this ideal love. And somehow we are never able to do it. Somehow, love doesn't last, even though we seem to be on the verge of experiencing something true and ideal. You will see Romeo and Juliet, you know the story, where they both had to die. You've seen the movie The Titanic, and I point out it was not the size of the ship which made the movie great. It was something else which happened there. It was like an alchemy, a transformation, a brief spark of true love that these two young people experienced. It's that which made the movie great. And you notice what happens at the end of the story. The director of the film, in an interview, explained, we had the choice. We could make him live, or we could let him die. And we chose to let him die. And you understand why. Because he died, that moment's spark of true love became immortal. It stayed with her through her life as her inspiration. And in the movie it's beautifully shown, her life ends in that union. But if he had lived, what would happen? They would have got married, they would have quarreled, perhaps separated. The true love would have gone very quickly. Very quickly. It doesn't last. It seems to last only for a brief moment, and if you want to freeze that moment, someone has to die. The god of death places this as an argument to Savitri in the text of Savitri. And says, in order for love to become immortal, it has to die. Therefore, death is greater. You see? That's the argument. And of course, Savitri counters that. But you see, in this moment of self-forgetfulness, a promise, and the promise reminds us that something is possible because I know it is possible. How do I know? Because somewhere deep inside me, behind all the layers, deep in the psychic being, I know the oneness with the divine, and I know the bliss of union which is destined. And that resonates through so many layers and gives us something, some promise of something beautiful. But most often it is only a fleeting contact, for in the human being, love is immediately mixed with lower egoistic movements which debase it and rob it of its power of purity. But even if it remained pure, she says, this contact with the divine existence cannot last forever, because it is one facet of many things. And so she says, all these experiences are good and useful because they lead us stumbling towards some future unity. But it's possible for us to speed up that process, to pursue that line of possibility and develop more and more directly the contact with the divine. And for that, there is a special requirement, or there are many requirements she discusses here. We won't go into those. But I just touch upon two things. One, she points out that one grows into the likeness of what one loves. And when you begin to love the divine, then you begin to grow into the divine consciousness. And many things which are normal to the divine consciousness begin also to reflect in us and grow in us. So she says the requirement which is for this is to turn to the divine and seek that love in the divine. But practically in our human life, to replace all our personal relations with the idea of our relationship with the divine in people behind circumstances. And as a result, she says, we have to develop a total, unvarying, constant and egoless kindness and goodwill towards all. But the joy and the gifts of all the joys and pleasures and help and support, we expect only from the divine. Even if it comes through people, we recognize that it comes from the divine. Such is the nature of the discipline by which we can build more and more directly that connection with the divine and experience directly the action of the divine love. Not necessarily something which everybody is in a position to practice in daily life. And therefore, what we can draw from that as a simple first step is to bring in this idea that all of our existing desires are only distorted reflections of a deeper truth. All of our existing relationships carry a deeper divine potential, and we can grow towards that potential when we remember the divine presence in all things. And a simple exercise which you can begin this journey is every morning when you sit for that period of concentration, after you have worked within yourself, you turn to gaze at the world around you. Begin with your immediate family members who receive the worst of you generally, and open your heart with love towards them. Visualize in your mind's eye the presence, the light of the divine love in their hearts, and let the love from deep within you, the light within you, pour out towards that center of the divine presence in them. And then you turn to the larger community with which you have to interact, the people that you have to work with, and similarly extend this love, not towards the person, not towards the personality, not towards his bad behavior, but to the divine presence, secret within their heart. And it has nothing to do with their behavior. The person that I hate most, I can still recognize the divine presence in his heart and extend the love to the divine presence, not to him. And this is possible to do. And you visualize, you feel this for a while. And then if you like, extend it to all humanity, all those you do not know, in a general way. And all creatures, all sentient creatures, animals, plants, stones, towards Mother Earth, to all beings in the whole universe, to the whole universe itself, and back to the divine. Visualize this, feel this, remain immersed in this for a while, and then enter your day. You need do nothing else, but just this exercise persistently continued. You will notice how things begin to change very quickly. if as a result of these you begin to have also more concretely the contact with your own psychic being, then you will find things changing even more directly. And so this is in brief the text which we had taken up for our study, the 4 austerities and leading to the 4 liberations, where she says the Tapasya of Love leads to the liberation from suffering and the total realization of the oneness. The Tapasya of Knowledge frees us from ignorance of the mind and develops the mind of light. The Tapasya of the Vital leads us to freedom from desire and the power to identify our will with the divine will. And the Tapasya of the body consciousness frees us from slavery to nature's laws. And this together, all of these make us ready for the highest realizations. So in a sense, it's a program for life, perhaps even a program for lives together, of which small beginnings can be made as we are where we are today. And this was the large framework intended for the theme of this retreat, which is the divine in daily life. So I will pause here and invite your comments, questions.
This morning you talked about a concept that I have a problem with professionally and on a daily basis, and that's having a concept that I know and understand subconsciously but can't put in words vocally.
Yes.
And one concept that I've had trouble, that I know what it is conceptually but have trouble putting into words, when asked is, what is love?
Mm-hmm.
How would you define love? So I was just curious if you could help, invite you to help me define what is love.
Well, I think that was the theme of this whole session. And I would go back purely to this. Love is in its essence the joy of identity. It finds its ultimate expression in the bliss of union. Between the two lie all the phases of its universal manifestation. One of the problems with love is because it has so many colors. And the language does not allow you a vocabulary to express all those colors. In English it is one word. I love to eat ice cream. I love my dog. I love my parents. I love you. And they're completely different experiences. There's something common, of course, and so the whole thing is grouped together and made into love. And so what happens is when the teenager falls in love, he says, I love you. He doesn't say, I passion you, I infatuate you. He thinks it's love. But it's infatuation, it's a passion, it's whatever, one of the many colors of that, even within that. And then much later, perhaps in life, he may experience something closer to true love. And says, oh yeah, that was just passion. But we don't have a vocabulary, unfortunately, in the language. So the experiences get conflated together and then we are confused because we think it's the same thing. It would help a lot if the language offered you different terms. But all of these colors of variations fit into these two extremes. The joy of identity and the bliss of union and everything else in between. Yes? Okay, yes. And she prefaces this by saying you cannot understand this unless you glimpse the experience itself. So finally you'll have to fall back to that.
I think love is a good feeling.
Yes.
It's just a plain old good feeling.
Good feeling is one of the many colors. Good feeling is one of the many colors. Okay.
Yeah, but basically you feel good. You feel like Anand.
Okay, next question.
Every one of your presentations reminds me of something of my childhood in the ashram.
Come, please share it. These are rare occasions we have of people who had some concrete contact with their mothers, so I would rather it's also recorded. Do you have the mic? Does it work? There's one there.
As youngsters, I would say maybe 7, 8-year-old, when mother used to conduct classes for us in the playground, she also had us keep a diary of what we did every day and what we thought we did wrong. Right? She had never made a list of saying these are the things you should not do or these are the things you should do. It was never put that way to us ever that I can remember. So every day we'd submit at the end of the day, we'd had a little notebook and we'd write in French and send it to her mother. Today I did this, I got angry at this or whatever, that we as children felt was wrong, was our judgment, not anybody else's. So we'd send it to her. Not a single time did it come back saying, oh, how could you do this, or why did you do that? She would correct my French, and her blessings. So she never imposed any values of right and wrong. It was something that she wanted each one of us to find for ourselves and define for ourselves.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Last question.
Last question.
The sacred grove. Definition.
Symbol, it's a symbol. I can't reduce it with a definition. The forest, see, these are, a symbol has a tremendous power because it can be understood on so many levels. The question was the definition of sacred grove. Okay, it's a symbol, but a symbol can be experienced on so many levels. And the moment we try to reduce it to a definition, we kind of narrow to one flat grade level. We lose that multiplicity of its meaning. But if I don't narrow it too much, the forest in the Veda has this sense of the multiplicity of life. And in the forest, each plant carries deep within it the sap, the juice, which is its nourishment, which is its life force. And the Veda describes how you take that plant, and to draw out the sap, you have to crush the plant, grind it with stone, and then the sap comes out, the soma, but it's not yet pure. It must be filtered, strained, purified, and then offered to the gods, and then drunk. It is the wine which invigorates, which strengthens, the wine of delight. And so you see the place of the forest. The forest is the fullness of life. And all the experiences are these vines, creepers, plants. Each experience carries deep within itself some essence of the divine delight, the sap. But from the experience, from the form of the experience, if tear out the form and draw out that essential delight, and still the delight is tainted, you have to purify it. But already in the process of claiming it, it is still personal and tainted by the ego consciousness. You must offer it first to the divine. It belongs to the divine, it is an expression of the divine. And then you drink of it. And it is the delight which burst out when the whole universe was born from the oneness of the divine consciousness. It is the delight which is now seeping inside, working from within, secretly within all experiences. Drawn out, made explicit, purified, and then enjoyed. And it is that which makes us immortal. Who is drinking that delight? The soul deep within us, the psychic being. it, through all of our life experiences, draws a little bit of that sap, grows a little bit, nourishes itself by the contact with beauty, with love, with truth, with goodness. Everything that gives it a touch of the divine is its nourishment. And it is that which drinks from that sap and grows. And over lives, across lives, it grows until it comes more and more into its own. And this is the symbol which is being conveyed in this image. And you see the place of the forest and the complexity of the life play. But within that, you must always remember, is this sap of immortality, of delight, which is secret within everything. Nothing is there in life which you can say is wrong or false entirely. Briefly, this touches upon the discussion of the morning session, a passage which I wanted to touch upon, but which we did not, so let me just complete it. In the Tapasya of Knowledge, he says, it is part of the training that we realize each idea contains a little of the truth, one aspect of the truth, but no idea is absolutely true in itself. And we have to cultivate this sense of the relativity of things. Within every experience there is something, some touch of that divine presence, something you can draw from as a nourishment for the soul. And the soul uses it. What we consider good or bad is equal to the soul. What matters for the soul is what nourishes it to grow closer to the divine. That's all that matters. Painful experiences sometimes to us as a personality are still for the soul a great learning experience, great nourishment. I grow through this. Through this struggle, the heroism grows in me. The strength grows in me. And so we look at the whole journey of life as an adventure, as a play, and as a battle. But it is also a journey where it is the one divine who meets the one divine through many masks, through many forms. And it is that contact of the one divine meeting the one divine which is the spark of love. Each time when the oneness touches oneness, briefly there is that flash of light, that spark, and that's the love. And that is why it is possible to experience what I earlier described. You see the whole world and everything is beautiful. And love pours out towards everything and pours back to you from everything. And everything has this glow of divinity. It's already like that, it's just we cannot see it. And all we need is an awakening of the inner touch to begin to recognize, glimpse that. The universe is already like that. We can hold this idea, hold this vision, and briefly concentrate on it, meditate on it. Feel in our hearts our love for the divine and receive in that love the downpour of the divine love for us and for the whole cosmos. Ooh.